Hey everybody, welcome to our new time, Web3 Wednesdays. What kind of internet do you want? I'm Amy James.
I'm Devin James.
And
Bitcoin is $27,500, and it's a fun day for conspiracy theories today.
yes, we have a very fun show today. Of course, at the top of the show, we have to talk about the SBF trial because it is just starting to get underway. Jury selection has happened and opening statements are expected today. This is the most frothy thing happening in the news when it comes to what's going on in crypto. And yet here I stand once again, the contrarian, saying it is also the most boring, sort of like the Bitcoin price. Not exciting, not interesting, and yet the only thing people talk about, right?
I mean, all they're doing is jury selection right now. I was all like, oh, we're going to talk about the case. And like literally I was having one of the GPTs kind of summarize the things, and it summarized it with the end of the trial. I'm like, we're in jury selection. This is the most boring state. I mean, obviously the lawyers love this part, but...
Whatever. The point really is that this is just a garden variety fraud case having literally nothing to do with crypto except that he used it as the facade for the fraud. And it reminds me of... Do you remember that show we used to watch, Madam Secretary? Okay, so something was like going on and she wanted to hide it from the news. And so she goes on this like really public shopping spree because she's very fashionable. And the secret thing happening in the background, and this is what I think is like, what's really going on behind the curtain? What is the SBF trial being used to hide from all of us? And I would say the distraction is that we're kind of in this make or break time for whether or not the crypto industry thrives in the United States. And we're not paying attention to that. We're paying attention to
something kind of dumb.
Something, something that's like, again, allegedly he, this sort of sociopathic criminal, like did a bunch of bad things. Oh no.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with how
It's
important...
going to get everyone's attention, and it's going to go away for a long time, and he's related to all these different influential people, so there's obvious, graft going on and obvious corruption. I completely agree with you. It's the most boring thing happening in crypto, but it's got literally every crypto reporter's attention.
It's going to dominate the news cycle, and it's going to really burn a lot of the progress that we had made in the on the regulatory front, particularly among legislators, because obviously, as we all know now, he contributed a lot of money to them. So we had to mention it, of course, but let's actually talk about things that are important.
Well, the other thing we had to mention is actually breaking news you discovered last night.
Well, this I think is important, which is that the SEC appeal of the Ripple ruling was rejected. And the interesting thing here is that, this is moving us forward in a meaningful way as an industry that we have been waiting on for years and years now. The district judge said in a brief ruling Thursday that the SEC had failed to meet its burden under the law to show that there were controlling questions of law and that there had been substantial grounds for differences of opinion. So that was the reason that the appeals request was denied. And they will be looking at the other pending issues in April of 2024. So they may still try to appeal the case overall once that has happened, but the appeal, this sort of appeal among, in the process was denied for now. So I don't think this is the clarity that we're hoping for exactly, but it is a step hopefully in the right direction for all of us.
Hopefully. I'm reminded of something that Gensler said in an interview where he was basically framing it as, we're going to keep on bringing these cases until we start losing them. And that's weird, but if you give him the benefit of the doubt, what he's really saying is, we aren't lawmakers, we are trying to interpret something that is kind of hazy, we have an opinion. If courts start repeatedly disagreeing with us, then they're saying that's the edge. That's where the line is. This is where you don't keep on going. So hopefully it means that they don't keep on appealing and that they just recognize that multiple times now this has been, affirmed that this is the state of the law. It depends on whether Gensler or the SEC in general kind of has it out for crypto, really, is really just trying to punish, those who go against him kind of thing. And that's obviously not their role. So I hope not. I hope this is,
Well, at the end of the day, this is something I've been saying a lot recently. It's we need the kind of clarity that doesn't depend on who the leader of an organization or, a department in the government is, in order for us to be able to build cool stuff, change the internet in a positive way, launch new projects.
We were just debating whether to kind of offer some suggested amendments to something that would kind of push some aspects, specifically DPIN, a lot of those kind of tokens, over into the CFTC's jurisdiction. And one of the arguments was, of course, that, that Gensler is very unfriendly to this, right? And the kind of counter to that was, well, Gensler will be out in the next 2 years, and it's very likely that Hester Peirce will be in, and then we've got a friend. And it's kind of like, is it the devil you know versus the devil you don't know? Who knows how the CFTC will kind of handle these kind of things? But I remember you made that point, and it's like, we need to make those decisions based on what makes the most sense, what agency makes the most sense, what these things actually are, like legally, what are they? Not just, who should be in charge of kind of governing them, because there's a big difference between those two things. And you're absolutely right. They change every few years, and you can't just be like, just because they're friendly to us, we'd prefer them. Like, that wouldn't make any sense at all.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah. But one last thing was just the actual motion. If you want to take a look at it, it's in the show notes. There's a link to it, and you get the whole thing right here.
Yeah, you can read it for yourself. I'm a big fan of going to the source material when you're trying to figure something out. So there it is.
Indeed.
Check it out.
Indeed.
Okay, so one more bit of fun news before we, get into some more serious stuff. I don't even know if you could call it more serious, what we're moving on to after that. But hey, during our broadcast today, in the next
about 7 minutes.
Possibly. Apparently, the window's about a half hour. We will be having a nationwide test of the emergency broadcast system. So, if your viewing of the show is interrupted, be sure to hop back in and keep hanging out with us. But the funniest part about this article is this line right here. No, it's not a national conspiracy to infect people with nanoparticles. Yes, it does go all the way back to the Cold War in the 1950s. No, we can't play you the tone. We could get hit with a big fine if we did.
I hope we're not going to get a fine if it goes off on your phone.
But most importantly, the test is But mostly, the test is an important way to make sure that if something really bad and really big happens, Americans can be warned quickly. And what I think is hilarious is that it's just so... It's such a great, it's almost like performance art or something of like where we stand in the state of technology, because if we think that we need a buzzer going off on our phones to let us all know that something really bad and really big has happened,
a really good point.
And we're not all just going to find out on Twitter.
Yeah. I mean, I remember like 9/11 was probably in my lifetime the largest domestic event, and there was no emergency alert. My mom called to wake me up first thing in the morning, kind of thing, and of course it was out on the TV, kind of thing. And this is 20 years ago, but we had a national.
And so,
but the point is,
she wouldn't have necessarily called you because it felt like it applied to you. You were going to be.
There should have been an emergency alert.
That's
there
fair.
wasn't. So,
that's fair. Yeah.
At what point? Anyway, I got a kick out of this just because I think if you're in the crypto industry, you enjoy conspiracy theories. You probably have
you're just more exposed to them than most people. Yeah.
Certainly. So there's been a handful of good ones wrapped around this one. Nazis from the moon. The cell towers are going to infect everyone with like a virus activate the Marburg virus and turn everyone into zombies. And I was reading that one to Amy, and she's like, "Wait a minute, isn't that the plot of a movie?"
Oh yeah, the Kingsman.
Yeah,
exactly. This sound is emitted from the free cell phones that they gave to everyone, and it makes everybody start turning on each other.
Yeah. So we'll be watching for you. We only see a little sliver of window out
there.
No,
I mean, wouldn't we just like turn on each other?
Oh, I guess you'll see it. So that'll be fun. Yeah. So if it's the worst, you get to see it live. If it's just an alert, we're going to turn off the phone as soon as it goes off, and we can move on with our day. So we'll know that it's working. Now, it's weird, though. It did say that they're all going to happen simultaneously across the country, but then other articles said there's a 30-minute window.
There's a 30-minute window. You could have it at any time. Who knows?
It might be in the next 4 minutes. It might be in the next 34 minutes. We'll see. Yeah. Anyway, moving on to other conspiracy theory-related news. We got a kick out of this one. This is a lot of people's favorite conspiracy theory is that either we never went to the moon or that the early landings were faked or the video of it was faked. Who knows? So this story, NASA plans to use blockchain to store data on the moon. The solution would keep Earth's secrets safe. So let me go through some of the details here.
Please do.
Computer startup Lone Star on the Isle of Man, working with NASA, are going to join forces to spearhead a new data solution using blockchain to safely store data on the moon. I'll be honest, I've read 3 or 4 different versions of this story. They put out a press release, put out a video, a whole bunch of different entities covered it. It's really unclear to me what actually is happening here. A lot of them try to put the spin on it that this is going to have something to do with proving that the moon mission was real. Like this one just has this little kind of mention. People often tell NASA you made up the moon missions, and proving they're actually there is surprisingly difficult.
Right, it was all Stanley Kubrick or something.
Yeah. And then also, so again, it's really unclear what this whole thing does. But basically, the idea is that they're going to put this little box on the moon that's a 1 terabyte drive, and somehow it's going to then use blockchain technology back on Earth to validate its contents. This is being done to safeguard them in case the planet becomes unlivable. And then one of the people behind it kind of argues that it makes it unhackable because you'd physically have to be present on the lunar surface in order to hack it. Okay, what? First of all, if it's transmitting, if it's got some sort of a network connection to a blockchain back here on Earth, then that's absurd for 2 reasons. One, you don't need to physically move something 393,000 miles away in order to...
Oh, there it goes.
Well, there's our thing. Anyone turning into a zombie yet? Okay. I think you got to actually turn the phone off if you want to.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
You don't have to put something on the moon in order to make it unchangeable. When they mean unhackable, they don't mean take data from it. They mean change the data in it. You just need to use a blockchain. Amazing. Right? And they're acting as if, and also, if there is in fact a data connection to it, then you can do data breaches. You can modify data on it. It's no more secure just because it's really far away. So I honestly don't get it, and I certainly don't get why anyone's claiming that this has anything to do with being able to prove that the moon missions happened. There's a lot of misunderstanding about blockchain
ridiculous
technology.
part. It's okay, if the moon landing was faked on a movie set, wouldn't you just put this box on the movie set?
Yep. And even if you were to do something like, it receives GPS data to show exactly where it was, well, you can fake that before it goes into the blockchain storage data. So whether they happened, they didn't happen, this is all for, the upcoming missions, whether they are real, whether they aren't real. There's plenty of people out there that think we literally can't escape Earth's
the
orbit,
Van Allen radiation belt and all that kind of stuff, right? Yeah.
So again, none of those people are going to be convinced based on this because you either don't understand the technology and you just can make goofy blanket statements that don't actually make sense and don't have anything to do with the underlying technology, and thus take it on faith because that's what you're doing because someone's just telling you this, or not take it on faith because you're going, well, someone's telling me that this is proof, but it's really just telling me to take it on faith. So it's just kind of stupid. Honestly, especially if someone's spinning it as this is going to be the proof that we went back to the moon, they're just going to reinforce the people that don't think we did because this is no way to actually prove that.
The best part...
Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe actual details about this will come out over time and it'll be,
that'd be cool.
Easier to understand, and somehow I don't know what you could do to prove that you're on the moon, honestly, within a blockchain. And the blockchain stores data once it's been captured. How that has anything to do with what the data is being captured, how it's being captured, anything else
right,
like that doesn't make any sense.
That is one of the fundamental misunderstandings, I think, of blockchain technology that is really well illustrated by this example, is that it's not a record of truth.
Right.
It's a record of things that were stored.
It's a record.
Whether
it's
or not
proof that it hasn't been changed since it was stored.
Or
whether it was a
proof
lie
that
when
it
it got
has,
stored. Exactly,
right? But just
exactly.
like it is, yeah, right. It's just this unalterable record.
Right.
Full stop. That's all that it's capable of.
Right.
It's not actually capable of, deciding what's true.
Right.
And that's, I think, where people get really confused. I
Clearly.
have to say, though, compliments to the team on doing a really good job with like connecting the project to interesting PR.
That's true. They got a lot of
Right?
They got a lot of press coverage. I mean, it's inaccurate press coverage, but at least it got covered.
Hey, it's a good story.
Good but also, I honestly have to wonder how much they're going to spend to send a 1 terabyte drive. And also, I kind of skipped over that the point was that they want to put data on the moon so that in case the world is wiped out, the data continues to exist. And it's like, there's much smarter ways to do that. We don't need to put it on the moon. And
I mean, the emergency broadcast thing did just go off. It could wipe us all out.
Yeah, I don't see
honestly, though, I have to note for those following along at home, it went off 2 minutes early.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm. So who knows what that means? Maybe it is a true emergency, but I turned off my phone, so I don't know.
So we'll never know. Yeah, indeed. Yeah. Anyway,
all right.
Yeah.
Moving on to our next story. Speaking of people that are good at getting press, Paris Hilton is launching a new Web3 project. She is definitely one of the queens of Web3. She's historically early to technology, so it's not a surprise to see her, actually, she's been in the space for a number of years now and has a pretty deep understanding. She's a really smart businesswoman.
I did not know that.
And so she is launching this new project similar to Tamagotchis in the 90s, for those of you that are familiar. For those of you that aren't, it was like a digital pet that would need you to check in on it on a regular basis, feed it, take it out, all of those kinds of things, give it love. And so there is this new project that she's launching. You, of course, mint them like NFTs, and they are algorithmically created to have different accessories that are, Paris kind of iconic accessories. So bedazzled DJ headphones, That's Hot necklace, blinged out Y2K phone, and other sliving details.
What is sliving? I saw that.
Sliving is her word. I don't know if it means like it's something about.
She made it up.
Yeah. Okay. It's like a That's Hot kind of similar kind of thing. Okay, so when you watch the hype video about it, you're going to see it right here.
Yeah.
I hate to say this because I think Paris is so awesome, but it reminds me of was it Jake or Logan Paul?
I don't remember
thing
one of Paul's,
that they did
Yep.
They did that like zoo.
They never actually released them. That was a big
They
controversy.
did though. You could but they were
ish kind of. Yeah, I remember what you mean. But that all is a derivation of there was the one that went really big on the Ethereum network. It was the very first.
Oh, CryptoKitties.
Same exact concept. Where, like the concept of kind of the genetics of these little individual animals being derived from kind of the hash value or something like that. So that something's variable, and then also you put two of them together, and they're going to have similar features and stuff like that. It makes sense that this is the kind of thing that would be popular. I didn't realize that Paris Hilton had been kind of in emergent technology always at the beginning. That's fantastic. I mean,
Oh my gosh, you sold her a Mac back in the day. I forgot about that.
Oh my God, I forgot about that. Yeah, I did actually. Yeah, I used to work at an Apple store in Hollywood at the Beverly Center. No, I didn't sell her the Mac. I sold her. No, I had to bring it out to her car. I didn't sell it to her.
Oh, okay.
She was in a hoodie. She's all looking all hidden and everything like that. And they asked me to do a walkout, and it was maybe like a really big iMac or something or other. And I take it down, and complete mess of a car.
Don't.
Sorry. I mean, she was like 22 at the time. Like,
yeah, all of
so
our
was
cars
mine.
were a mess.
Lord, my goodness.
So yeah, just a fun little project. We'll see where it goes.
Yeah.
But happy to see her doing stuff in Web3 for sure.
Yep. All right. So back to Friend.Tech. We talked about this in our last episode. It has been on quite a ride, super, super popular, and then its popularity drops through the floor, and then everyone's like, oh, it's dead, and then maybe it's not dead, it's still kind of going and it's coming back and everything like that. Well, it made it back into the news this past week because several Friend.Tech users were targeted with a SIM swap attack and lost many Ether. So a SIM swap attack, this really, honestly, it has nothing to do with Friend.Tech. People are trying to connect it to Friend.Tech because it's connected to your Twitter account, and your Twitter account could be then obviously connected to your real person, and your real person could help people figure out what your phone number is. And if they figure out what your phone number is, they can figure out what your phone carrier is. And apparently, if it's Verizon, they're particularly bad about social attacks to change someone's carrier or their phone number really to a different SIM. Because apparently what they do is they either use someone working at a Verizon store or someone calling and just trying to manipulate people. And the way that this one worked is that he got just dozens of calls and text messages all just really, really quickly within just a few minutes of each other so that he would put his phone on silent. And then when he put it on silent, what he missed was that he got some messages from Verizon saying, hey, we're ready to talk to you soon. And another one, and this one's the real security vulnerability here. There's a request to access your account, blah, 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 please confirm or deny here. He never responded to it. And they apparently just treat it like if you don't get back to them within a few minutes, they just assume it's honest.
Wow.
Really dumb. Yeah, exactly. So this really has very little to do with Friend.Tech, except for the fact that, well, I guess because Friend.Tech kind of revealed that this particular user had X many keys, and thus those many keys were worth this much, Ether, it made it clear what would yield if you attacked this particular cell phone.
I mean, the thing is here is that SIM swap attacks have been going on way back. You said Verizon is particularly bad, but AT&T was the one connected with Michael Turpin's SIM swap attack.
Too. Okay.
And it was in, how many years ago did that attack happen?
4 years ago at least,
I feel like it was way back, 17, 18, I don't know. But it was, these attacks are the same. Mm-hmm. And
yeah, it's just Friend.Tech was how they discovered who to target. In Turpin's case, he's a celebrity within the crypto space. A whole lot of people that are especially traders, where they kind of brag about how much they've made. All they're doing is letting people know how much it would be worth to pull off an attack that you can't really protect. Like, your carrier is not going to be as good at protecting your identity as you will, most likely, I would say.
Yeah, it's, I don't know, what's the solution?
Well, the article ends with a suggestion, what some Friend.Tech users think would be the solution, adding 2FA. I don't get how that would, because if an attacker has taken over basically through a SIM swap your phone number, now there's different versions of 2FA. So maybe it's just that the writer of this particular article kind of conflated them in a way that made it not really true. Because if you do 2FA over SMS, then the attack would have been valid, would have worked anyway, because the attacker would have received the actual the 2FA code. Using a code-based one, an authentication service where it's not tied to your phone number, it's not coming over SMS, but it's being generated by your device cryptographically or anything else like that, could certainly be the solution, because no one can get that remotely if it's being stored in your password manager, assuming that your password manager is secure. Honestly, I don't know. A lot of people are acting like the real danger there is that because Friend.Tech is connected to Twitter accounts, and Twitter accounts can easily be doxxed, or everyone within Twitter or X has the whole database, so even if you have an anonymous account. So it definitely brings up the issue of the importance of anonymous accounts even on Web 2, not just in Web 3. A lot of people argue like there's just no valid reason for anonymity. Someone that has bootstrapped themselves from a paperclip up to $100,000 by just being a really smart trader has plenty of reason to have anonymity, because obviously the carriers don't do a very good job of protecting against SIM swaps, and so completely outside of your control, you can lose access to the thing that protects your money. Obviously, best thing you could do is just keep it on an actual, offline cold wallet in your safe, anything else like that, but you can't be doing anything active with it if you're doing that. So I don't know. It's a tough call. It's a very tough call, but it definitely points to the fact that some of the biggest weaknesses within crypto security have nothing to do with Web3 itself. They have to do with cell carriers, they have to do with Web2 platforms, so on and so forth. And that's unfortunate, but something we have to deal with. And maybe it just will give incentive for those platforms to adopt Web3 functionality sooner than they would otherwise, because right now they are very insecure vectors of attack.
Yeah, we'll see.
We'll see. Okay, well, on kind of the front of Web2 players getting involved in Web3 and making big mistakes along the way, PayPal overpaid, well, really their partner, their payments partner, Paxos, this is kind of poorly oriented because you can't really read it with the logo back there, overpaid more than $500,000 in the largest Bitcoin transaction fee ever, in USD terms, that is. So basically what happened is there's a whole lot of people that just kind of watch blockchain for various different things and even automated alerts and stuff like that. And one pops up with, hey, someone paid more than $500,000. They overpaid by, what is that, 479,000x what the fee needed to be. For those that aren't familiar, the way that Bitcoin fees and most blockchain fees work is they don't really have anything to do with the size of or the amount of money being sent or the amount of Bitcoin being sent, but they have to do with the size of the data of the transaction itself. So sometimes there can be more expensive transactions simply because there's a whole bunch of inputs being fed into it. Say you're taking a whole bunch of accounts and simplifying them into one wallet. That will be a large transaction as far as the data is involved, and larger transactions will charge more. Nowhere near this kind of magnitude. So right away, everyone could kind of tell, like, yeah, there's something wrong here. This wasn't just like congestion, because the blockchain has been congested for a while, but this isn't just congestion. Someone messed up. So a lot of people thought...
The notion of congestion
You're muted.
The notion of congestion causing this size of a transaction fee...
I know.
At this
stage...
Well,
no one thought it pretty quickly. Exactly.
It's funny.
So most people just guessed fat finger, just someone put too many zeros on a transaction or something else like that. And then pretty quickly realized it was a programmatic, like there was something wrong within the software itself. And I've worked on some software attached to wallets where you have to actually create all the pieces of a transaction. And if you don't know what you're doing, you can really easily screw up. I made the assumption, I remember at one point, that if you've got, say, outputs of or inputs of, say, half a Bitcoin, and then you have an output of a quarter of a Bitcoin, the assumption is that the rest is going to go back, right?
Right,
In reality, the rest is the transaction fee. So you have to account for all of the different outputs that you want to create, and whatever is left over will be the fee. I assumed that that's what it was in this case. I don't know that it actually was, but it was definitely, it was eventually figured out that this was going into a PayPal wallet. It was done by Paxos, by them doing it. And then Paxos put out a press release saying, we screwed up. It only impacted our corporate operations. End users aren't going to be impacted, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So could be pretty devastating news. $500,000 mistake. Oops, like that programmer.
It's a lot of money to just lose.
Screwed, right. But the Bitcoin community is kind of amazing. The pool immediately announced, the pool that mined the transaction immediately announced, hey, we just got a 20 Bitcoin fee here, and it was obviously a mistake. We're going to give 48 hours for whoever it belongs to actually kind of speak up and say it's me. And pretty quickly, the community actually figured out that it was Paxos. They connected with each other, and F2 Pool gave them the money back. And a lot of people are like, why? Lop had a great tweet explaining why. He actually, when he worked at Bitco, something similar happened where someone made an 80 Bitcoin fee mistake, which would be, $4 million now. At the time, obviously, in 2016, Bitcoin was a lot less expensive. So again, still, this is the most expensive in dollar terms. But at the time, it was reversed because there is enough transparency. You don't even need to know who the other party is, but you know who it came from. So you could just voluntarily say, well, I know this is a mistake. I'm going to go ahead and send it back to them. In this case, they wanted to actually talk to who it was and figure out what was going on. And I'm glad. I love the way he put it. Bitcoin is an adversarial network, but on the flip side, it's also a cooperative network.
Yeah, I love that too. It's something that we talk a lot about, that there are more of us that want to do the right thing. Everybody's so worried about scams and people like that, but it's like there are more of us that want to do the right thing, then the wrong thing. Can you go back actually just for a minute to that tweet? He also says at the end, miners are humans too, and they realize that people make mistakes.
Exactly.
While retaining egregious transaction fees makes for a nice short-term profit, returning those funds is the humane decision.
Yes.
And that's absolutely right. And that is why Bitcoin is such a great community, is that because, there's this it's really the one community in crypto where the spirit of co-opetition has pretty much held throughout. I think that there are other kind of aspects of crypto where there's excessive competition and not enough collaboration. But, the stakes are high when it comes to Bitcoin. And so people are, trying to make the best of it.
Well, they're high when it comes to Bitcoin, but they're also high when it comes to just overall Web3 adoption. And
they're
so
high
really
in theory. They're high in theory in terms of the stakes of what it means for the future of the internet.
Exactly.
But they're not high in practice in terms of the actual dollars and cents that people have invested.
Right.
And that's the difference.
Yep.
It's that skin in the game idea. And that's sort of sad because the dollars that we may make or lose in Bitcoin are much less significant than the knowledge that the web has the potential to retain and impart and make available. And that is really what is in danger right now and what Web3 offers the solution to. I just have to say one thing about this story, and really the Friend.Tech story before it was a comment in that Twitter thread, which is ready for mass adoption, laugh face, which and that was the main criticism that Brett Weinstein said to us when we were on his show as well, which is just that this technology, while cool and important, still is very intimidating to people, and it's stories like this that really highlight why people are intimidated, and somewhat rightly so. And I think that that's a criticism that we all need to face and address. And the answer that is too often bantered about in the crypto industry is, take personal responsibility, do your own research, kind of like sucks to be you when mistakes like this happen, or that they're resolved just through that cooperation. But that only is the case for people who rise to that level, for those enormous, who either have a large enough following or it's a large enough transaction, et cetera. But what about for people who don't meet any of those criteria?
When I made the mistake and lost $50 in a transaction fee when I didn't need to, no one returned it to me. That's for sure.
Right. Yeah. Right. So how are we going to handle those things? It's very urgent question for us to solve.
Well, and it also just kind of suggests that in some terms we're early. We're still early because those questions haven't been answered yet, And I'm really glad that there's the good nature that will as often as possible overcome and try to signal to the rest of the world, no, this community wants you, and if you make mistakes, you'll be forgiven for them. But you're right.
We're early, but it's also gone on for such a long time that we're kind of at that point of now where it's kind of like,
what are we waiting for?
We need to overcome this, or it's not going to make it.
Well, the rest of the world seems to be inclined to try to make it more than we are in some ways, unfortunately. And hopefully, we're a competitive world as well. So when things like this happen, hopefully they inspire, domestic policy a little bit better. So Buenos Aires releases blockchain digital identity solution powered by ZK Sync's ZK Proofs. So this is, okay. We've talked about digital identity in the past, DIDs. This isn't exactly that, and I can't tell. I actually really kind of tried to dig into it, whether it is compatible with DIDs. But the concept behind DIDs is creating an identity on the blockchain that you can then use to sign other things. Whether that identity is attached to a name or not is up to you. This is taking a different approach. This is basically just saying the types of things that governments issue you to define your status, whether it's a birth certificate to say you're alive, whether it's a marriage certificate to say that you have a legal marriage, can be stored as kind of identity documents in a blockchain. Normally, that would throw up red flags of saying, well, I don't want those kind of government documents to be stored on a blockchain. Well, if you use ZK technology, you can both protect the privacy of that data and also ensure that, like, if you just were to encrypt something and put it on a blockchain, it's only good to you, like, and to someone that you like show it to, and then you show the proof to on the blockchain. With the advantage of ZK technology is that it can prove that that its contents are authentic, or that it hasn't been changed, or that it can even kind of respond to a question of, does this person have an ID, or is this person in this particular district? It can give that affirmation without revealing the underlying data, which is pretty cool. Again, I do wish that this was actually built on the DID spec. As much as they're not exactly the same type of identity, there's at least a relationship between them, because once the thing is put into the blockchain, if it became a DID that you could then use to sign, or if it existed as its own thing and a DID existed as its own thing and you could connect them, there could certainly be some value there. As far as I can tell, Quark ID is not part of the DIDS spec. Literally
really
just from trying to Google the two, and there being literally no results where both of them kind of come up with W3C and DIDS. The word DIDS is a terrible thing to Google in the first place, but you add W3C since it's part of their actual spec, and I get no results. So I could be wrong. If anyone knows otherwise, please correct me. But yeah, so I knew you would be disappointed by that, because it's definitely one of your key things, and I would like to see it happen, but it's a different type of ID.
It's just because we need interoperability. Agreed. And unless we agree on a core set of standards, and you and I were just talking about, I've been kind of articulating that need for standards imprecisely, that people think about standards when it comes to just a particular protocol or a particular project, but what we really need are sort of like above protocol standards, and that's kind of what the DID spec is.
It is,
because
exactly.
it's saying,
it's the first one that I know of that does exactly that. Yeah.
Right, and identity is an enormous problem that the potential is really there for Web3 to solve, and so there's a lot of people that are super excited about how it can solve that problem, and there's, fortunately, when it comes to digital identity, an awareness among most people that in order for that problem to be solved, there does need to be that sort of second layer standards that interoperability piece is required for a decentralized ID system to work. Yeah. So if this doesn't have that, that's a massive problem for the people of Buenos Aires.
But I would argue that it's not hard. It wouldn't be hard to, because of the broad way that the DID spec was designed. It's basically just the hash of a transaction ID put into a particular format as a URI kind of thing. So I think it's entirely possible for it to.
They could upgrade it and normalize it. Yeah, that makes sense.
And it's kind of like when it's some of the very first iterations of governments actually trying to do this stuff. I know Wyoming had done some amount of government-issued IDs on blockchain. I think it was using Ethereum, and they were using the DID spec. So you're going to have these little pop-up things in various different places, and they don't need to be interoperable when they're only for their own local government. Eventually, when another government, when the national government discovers, hey, this is a pretty cool idea, I like this, or when there's kind of a regional decision by a bunch of countries around it, hey, we should have this be interoperable so that we can put like passports on them or anything like that. Then they will see the reason why, well, we should make sure that this is actually following some sort of a standard, because in this case, the company that's actually doing it is based out of Buenos Aires, and so it would make sense that they hired them, that they wanted to work with people that were local and understood their local government and stuff like that. If the U.S. implemented it, they would probably use domestic companies, and so they might choose a slightly different form of the technology. Thus, why you need those standards so that they can be compatible with each other. They're going to keep on rolling it out to the point where in November they will add the ability for you to add proof of income and certificates of academic attendance, which citizens will need if they want to claim benefits. And they do make the point that citizens will own their own data and decide how to manage their certificates when it comes to interacting with public services. By that, what they really just mean is if you own and control your own keys to your wallet, the data lives on the blockchain, but only you have control over it, or only you can kind of point to it and validate that it's in fact yours by signing your wallet and stuff like that. So that's pretty cool. Some people will definitely have some red flags of saying like, oh, we don't need, government issued anything to be put on blockchain. I think it's absurd to think that they like that. That's what adoption looks like. That's what growth
Exactly.
looks like when big institutions like companies and governments recognize the value of these things. I mean, even the moon story that I was making fun of is a little bit of proof of adoption. Like, even if they're misusing it, they're at least recognizing, hey, the way that things are stored right now is insufficient. Let's take a look at this better technology that everyone keeps on telling me is great in all these ways. And at least in this case, they're doing it well. They're doing it right. Using ZK proofs is a really smart way to handle this, so that you can put private data up, be able to use it to validate with online systems and still protect your privacy, and do it in such a way where the data can't be manipulated without having to store it on the moon. I'm going to make fun of that to the end of my days. So, yeah.
All right. Well, moving on to
stuff.
Web2 walled gardens. Google has been doing some cool things.
They have more kind of evidence of adoption happening when not just governments, but big companies like Google itself gets involved. Now, this is funny. I enjoyed this story primarily because it taught me something that has been around for 5 years now, and I didn't realize. You can basically use Google as a block explorer. Mm-hmm. Pretty cool. I always, aside from them being the big behemoth that is terrifying in all these different ways because they control search and do whatever they want with it, I did like Google Analytics. I always liked how much big data, how much they were able to kind of handle big data and make it useful for you and everything like that, and I always got a kick out of that. So finding out that they also hold 11 network. No, they've added 11 networks. So initially they put Bitcoin on in February of 2018, and then Ethereum, Litecoin, Dogecoin, and then with this announcement, they are adding 11 more, including Polygon, Optimism, and Polkadot. The name of the project is called BigQuery. For public data sets. And I don't quite understand what they mean by when they describe it as a serverless and cost-effective enterprise data warehouse. Like, yeah, cost-effective, definitely. I'm not sure what they mean by serverless. Honestly, the term kind of throws me a little bit because it does give you the ability to, maybe you don't have to run your own, is what they're kind of saying. I don't know. But it gives you the ability to kind of tap into blockchain data, do searches on it, and then because there's multiple now, you can actually kind of start learning things about how they interact with each other. Or there's a couple of examples that they give here. Data queries might focus on the number of NFTs minted across 3 specific blockchains, fee comparisons between networks, or how many active wallets sit atop chains that are compatible with the EVM environment. Very, very important. It kind of reminds me of in the mid-90s, there was articles coming out kind of questioning, well, how many actual internet users are there? Because the web you can kind of count, the internet you kind of can't. It's really hard to. And even more so, blockchain networks. It's really hard to count how many active users there are. We figured out various different ways, like a wallet that holds above a certain amount and has actually been active within a certain amount of time is probably a person. But I have multiple wallets, so how many people is it? I don't know. That's why people really stopped talking about how many users of Web3, and they just talk about how many wallets are involved. But they've also added support for the Ordinals project, which, if you're not familiar, it's basically NFTs on the Bitcoin blockchain. So honestly, it's cool stuff. We actually met with someone from Google, I don't know, a couple of months ago or so, and they've got a little team there that is all about Web3, and they see the future and they want to be a part of it. It also reminds me of the mid-90s when AOL added a web browser to their software.
Go to the web.
And it's like, it was necessary, obviously, and at the same time, it also ultimately spelled AOL's doom. Like they kind of, were trying to say like, hey, we're not behind the times. Like, we've got this new thing tool. You should stick with us. And plenty of people stuck with them for years as a result. But
they did it
very
because
relevant for years.
Users were becoming aware that there was a difference between kind of the walled garden of AOL service and the open jungle of the web. Just as a point of clarification for folks, this BigQuery service that Google is offering is a service that you pay for. So it's not just like you can go to it and look at stuff. It's that, people building stuff would use it to store the information that they want ready access to. So it's 2 cents per gigabyte per month. So it's
of retrieval or of storage?
For all stored data. And then long-term storage pricing charges a flat rate of 1 cent per gigabyte.
The blockchain is I don't have my own
for all
blockchain. I would just curious, very curious. I tried to actually try to sign up for it and use it. It's a little bit convoluted to go there, but
it's supposed to keep your data in active storage, which means it's kind of one of those. It makes me think of
that's what they mean about the retrieval time from actual blockchain. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
So
it makes me think
your
of
parts of what's getting stored on the blockchain
of similar to the graph, I would think, where it's like keeping stuff that you want.
Yeah. Findable,
ready instantly. Access to it. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, anyway, cool stuff. We'll see what it ultimately means for Google. If it either means that they're just going to make themselves the universal block explorer of all blockchains, and thus stay highly relevant, or if it's just going to lead the masses off of their centralized web. Who knows? Only time will tell. All right. Well, our next story, I think, is on you.
Yes, it is. So in the world of AI, the GPUs are a very hot commodity. They are what the large language models are used, to train the AI. That they're necessary to do that processing work. And the H100s are the top of the line of those GPU options. There's H100s, I think A100s, and then another 100s. The letter is escaping me at the moment. But the point being that the H100s are like wildly more efficient than the other versions. And the group Tether, who's behind the Tether, the stablecoin Tether, which is supposed to be pegged to the US dollar, they have done a deal to purchase 10,000 of the H100 graphics cards. The deal was worth $420 million. I think they probably just should have gone all the way and done, 420 million, 69,000, something like that, to like really get the PR close on that. But they've gained a 20% stake in Northern Data, a German-listed Bitcoin miner, and Northern Data plans to, this is the key part, rent the GPUs to AI startups. So hopefully they will use a Web3 rental network like a cash network. There are several of these kind of networks where they can make it available. A cash is the most well-known at this point. They're the furthest ahead in terms of the rental market that they have available, and particularly when it comes to GPUs availability.
H100s explicitly, yeah. That's an interesting spin that it's connected to a Bitcoin miner that's going to use them to kind of rent them out, because it's essentially the same concept. Like, take hardware, put it in your place, and then let other people come over and pay for it to run to generate Bitcoin. Or the new version of that is take this specialized hardware that needs to have, super cooling and, takes a lot of capital to get it in there, and then make it available to anyone who wants to use it. It's the same kind of concept. It's really smart. So you're right. To turn it really into something like, say, NiceHash for renting mining for training AI, you really need to use something like a cache. That would be an interesting take.
And the reason that somebody would want to get into this business is that there's most companies that need access to these GPUs to train their AI models only need them for a temporary amount of time. They don't need them ongoingly. And the sunk cost involved in the hardware is very high. And so it doesn't make sense for a lot of startups to buy their own GPUs. It does for some, but not for most of them. And so it's a great way for this kind of a company to provide that service and make money. And it's something that if they're already, like Devon was saying, a Bitcoin miner, it dovetails with the kind of work that they're already doing, and it just kind of opens up a new revenue stream for them without having to really expand, the core work that they're doing in any sort of way. So awesome, really AI is going to just be this explosive,
Yes.
on an explosive journey of growth over the next several years. And the infrastructure, in order for that to be possible, it won't be possible without the infrastructure necessary. And this is, one piece of that. So
Yep. Congratulations to them. That should be
yeah,
fun.
absolutely.
All right, well, our next piece, somewhat related to AI, is the Hollywood writers' strike has kind of ended. The negotiators feel like they came out with a fantastic deal, and they have told their writers that they can go back to work pending it coming out, because they're so confident that everyone's going to vote for it. So some things that don't involve actors are going to actually start getting their writers back, like all the late night talk shows.
Well, so before you get into the story, let's just be clear about that. There have been is it 3 different unions on strike?
2.
The writers, the actors.
The writers and the actors.
But wasn't it there wasn't a third one?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
No, I think there was some concern that the DGA might, but I don't think it ever did.
Okay, so
at one point I thought that the Producers Guild was, and then I realized, wait, the Producers Guild is literally who's representing the studios. They're the AMPTS.
Yeah.
So both of them have struck for 4 or 5 months now.
Yeah.
I think it started with the writers, and then the actors joined them. And over a whole lot of different issues. A lot of it has to do with just that pay hasn't kind of kept up with things.
It's because the business model of the industry changed, but the contracts for these workers didn't change, right? When we moved from distribution via DVDs
and
CDs, cable to distribution over streaming networks. The streaming networks, back in the day when we were first getting started in the industry, there was actually this carve out where if you were doing something in the new media, you could work with union talent without paying them union wages. Like there was just all of this benefit,
emergent. What was it called? New media, or I don't remember. I know what you mean.
Yeah. And so now that's kind of caught up to bite them, where it's like, okay, now they're doing this cost plus model where basically, they're paid one time a flat fee to make the show or whatever it is, and they get paid cost plus a little bit more, and that's the amount that, they're getting paid, and that's it. Right. The creator or the whatever it is. And so, yeah.
Well, it was a couple of different things. It was one, they wanted better pay that just kind of kept up with things. They certainly wanted more reasonable pay on the new way that people watch stuff,
because they're not getting residuals anymore, and they were used to that.
And streaming, exactly
right.
Residuals on cable and on broadcast kind of put a lot of people in their mansions in Hollywood. Especially because it incentivizes you to make a good show that isn't just going to run once, but it's going to get rebroadcast for years and years and years and years, because that's proof that it was a good show. And if it was a good show that gets run years and years and years and years, and in this case streamed, there's so much new content you could watch. If you choose to watch something that's years old, then it was particularly good. We've rewatched Friends many a times. It was very well written. That's kind of evidence of that. But the writers and the actors, but that's kind of an aside, the writers were quite upset that they weren't getting residuals from these things in the same way. Their underlying pay itself hadn't really kept up with things. And 2 other issues. One, having transparency on kind of the metadata surrounding the viewership of streaming content itself, because it's not broadcast, it's not cable. There were laws around broadcast and cable that meant that they had to kind of put their kind of data together, and I think honestly in their case make it public. In this case, they were just saying, we want to have it as the writers. We want to know, when people are tuning in, if midway through the season they just kind of drop out, if right after a particular point in an episode, or if at one particular point in an episode viewership is especially high, or if it drops off completely after a certain point. The studios had that because they controlled the streaming services themselves, but it's entirely proprietary technology. It's not open source. It's not certainly being shared.
Right.
In
With broadcast, we have the Nielsen ratings. Right there with music. There's the Billboard charts. There's there's always been this sort of public reporting. But when it moved to streaming, all of those numbers have been kept in-house and kept really, really private. And so the best that there is kind of like the rumor speculation, the gossip mills about who's doing what. But it's been a way that streaming services could hide if they were performing poorly.
Well, and it didn't. There was proprietary services that ran on top that weren't contracted by the studios or anything. They were just to kind of give intelligence to the industry itself, and people would just install them on their computer, and it would, keep track on what you're watching and stuff like that. And so it gave some insight, but it wasn't with the voluntary, the studios weren't working with it, so they weren't affirming anything else like that. So it was a way that you could kind of keep the studios in check. If they made some claim that just definitely doesn't make sense with what was being collected by this, the Twitterverse would explode and say, yeah, they're lying about that. This says this says this. Anyway, the writers really wanted to know what's actually happening, what's true, because it would inform their own writing. It would also, it would do two things. It would tell them how much residuals they should be getting, if there are residuals to come from something, but also, are they doing a good job? Was something working especially well? Was something not working really, poorly and stuff like that? And there's definitely been, without that feedback, there's definitely been some misdirection with streaming. There's been going way too far in one direction and not really kind of course correcting, way too far in the other direction and not really course correcting. And I would say that's partially because they didn't have this actual direct feedback. So one of the terms that they got out of this whole thing is that they are going to actually share the audience data with for the original streaming programs. However, it will most likely not be available to the public. I remember this, it made me think of like many, many years ago when we first got into this industry, we came up with an idea called Media Coin or Movie Coin or something like that. And that was one of its most important aspects, was it actually would report, just kind of like we're all used to on YouTube. As a YouTube creator, I know exactly when viewership went up or viewership went down, and it can give me the feedback I need in order to better shape my content so that it's enjoyable by my audience. But another very key focus for the writers throughout the negotiations centered on the potential use of artificial intelligence as a substitute for their work. They don't want to be replaced. And this is what, of course, when ChatGPT first came out, everyone's like, oh my God, all the jobs are going to be lost, da 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 da. And I was one of those people that didn't really we're many years from jobs being actually lost to this. The much better way, and anyone that isn't doing it this way is silly, is it give the writer access to ChatGPT. Let them decide to what degree they want to supplement their work, or if there's just some part that they don't understand the legal world well enough, and yet they're writing like there was a show, She-Hulk, that was kind of a legal drama or a legal comedy kind of thing, while also being this kind of superhero thing. But the writers clearly didn't have any experience with legal dramas, so they weren't good at that part at all, really. And because ChatGPT has the access to, Ally McBeal and, every single, courtroom show that's ever been out, you could probably ask it, make this actually accurate or sound like a courtroom kind of a thing. So you give it the beats or the points that you want the particular characters to say, and you ask it to have its expertise fill in the expertise that you don't have. That would be a great way to use this kind of thing. Now they have the ability to. The studios agreed they will not replace any writers with ChatGPT, but the writers can choose to use ChatGPT or any AI if they want to. They cannot be forced to, which is also pretty cool. However, interestingly enough, there is one little point that this article makes. The agreement does not prohibit studios from training AI on writers' works, which means the whole point that I was making at the beginning of, it's years before anyone's going to have their jobs replaced. Well, this is how they're going to actually replace the jobs. They're going to literally just train on the actual writers.
What's so interesting here is that this is one of the main points of contention with the actors, that the actors don't want to allow them to have their bodies scanned, their likeness scanned, and then just be able to be used, which is completely understandable and honestly horrifying if you are an actor.
I don't know that it is. I don't know that it is. Think about the Star Wars dilemma, right? I think there's a whole lot of people that just think
about the deep fake that we made of me to prove this point. I get it's horrifying.
Point. I get
Not only to be doing something compromised in like a sexual way, but also to participate in telling a story that you are morally, ethically, otherwise opposed to being a part of. Even in an artistic way, to just be like, I think it's bad art. I don't want to be associated with it.
How about a middle ground of... you have to receive the person's approval for how it's being used. But it can be used. Because where I'm going with this is, in the world of Star Wars, because I'm a nerd, in case you didn't know, we're now retelling stories that are right after Return of the Jedi. And the way the books went is Luke, Han, and Leia were central to all of them. Carrie Fisher died. Harrison Ford and Mark Hamill are both in their 70s or 80s. They can't play their right after Return of the Jedi characters. Disney famously hired a YouTube deepfake guy, Shamook, I think, in order to get their Luke just right for when he was in Book of Boba Fett, I think. And they did a good job. It was good. The very first iteration of that I don't remember what the name of the movie was, where they had Leia, it freaked people out.
Good, yeah.
It was not that, that didn't work. It didn't look good at all. And it was primarily because they were recreating it after the fact when the actress had already, I don't think she'd passed away yet, but it was her 50 years before. So in the scenario where the actor is still around or their estate is able to give the approval for something, and really it's just in order to do something you wouldn't be able to do with the actor now. There's actually plenty of examples of this happening. The latest Indiana Jones movie, they captured Harrison Ford himself doing things, and then they used footage of him from the past to deepfake his face so that it looked like the young Indiana Jones. So it's tough because you're a director, so I'm honestly kind of surprised. And you've talked about that actors are tools. You don't put them down in that way. You actually consider them very important tools.
But I'm the kind of director that likes to work with the actor because they often
there's still an actor giving this performance.
They often bring ideas and bring how they want to play it to me in a collaboration. I have worked with directors, worked under directors who see actors as their puppets, and they just want them to do exactly as they're told. And
that's not very
and
successful.
that would make sense for this kind of would make sense for that kind of director. Sure. I don't think it's that interesting because where the magic happens is in that collaboration. And so
it is. And however, just to be clear, in this scenario I'm talking about, there is still an actor performing. When they did Luke, the young Luke,
but they're not going to. The AI isn't going to be like,
on.
Here, I want to play it this way. I think you're getting this wrong.
Hold on,
the beat should be
like
this.
The AI isn't doing the performance at all, is what I'm trying to say. The AI is just face replacing, face swapping. It's just changing what someone looks like, but the performance is still captured from the person there on stage, on set itself. So when they had young Luke picking up Grogu, Mark Hamill was literally there, doing his performance, so that it's literally the same actor that has played this character, and he's working with directors and everything else like that, and then the point of the AI was to be able to make his face look like it should look as someone else, because in other cases you get a different actor to do it. When Paul Walker died, his brother played him, and then they deep-faked his face on top of it.
Okay,
so you still get the performance from someone that you work with, and you keep all those subtleties of the performance in a different face. That's the whole premise.
Okay, that is super interesting, but then it still gets into who's deciding that it's okay? If you're doing it with Mark Hamill and you're just aging him down, he's still agreeing to it. That's one thing. That seems perfectly on the up and up. Right. But you're doing it with Paul Walker. His brother's doing it. I mean, now his estate is making decisions on his behalf that he might not be comfortable with that being his legacy. What if you're able to do it with just living actors who have been
so far
and yet completely use somebody else to make decisions for them.
They own your likeness rights. Once you've kind of signed them, they belong to them. That part I think needs to change because they should not own the rights.
The way in which they were owning likeness couldn't compel a human to participate in things that they didn't want to.
Agreed.
And
it's just a picture that you can use in various different types of billboards and stuff like that.
Right.
However, they're trying to interpret that to say, well, now we have your likeness and we can recreate Leia as many times as we want to. That I agree. It needs to be with permission.
It's a dangerous, slippery slope.
I totally agree. I don't know where I think there's definitely going to be a version of it where it's being used for the sake of de-aging and it's being used for an actor that is no longer able to participate in something. Once they've died, I don't know where, because their estate has the right to decide all kinds of things about them. But is it okay for someone to decide how, a performance that is created after someone's death outside of their, so I agree. That part is definitely sticky. I completely agree that their permission needs to be sought and given in order to do this. I just think it's important to enable the technology to be able to do it when it's useful. There's edges around that are very hard to get right. I completely agree. So
I was just listening to the Mark and Ben show on the A16Z podcast talking about Hollywood, and it's a great listen if you're wanting to talk more think more about these topics. We need to move on because we're already running over. We could probably spend an hour talking about this alone. So let's move on to our regulatory segment. Yeah.
So we got a little special segment we're going to be starting here. Let's give it a roll.
Hey everybody, this is Eric Peterson with the Web3 Working Group. From now on, we're going to be doing a weekly recap of all things digital asset, politics, and regulation. So I'm so excited to be talking to you guys about what's going on in the world of government. Now, of course, the big news this week is that the government avoided a shutdown by passing 45 days worth of more funding. So Congress for the next month and a half is going to be working about passing the next batch of funding so they don't have a similar shutdown fight like they had over the weekend. Now, before all this shutdown drama started, the Securities and Exchange Commission head Gary Gensler was on Capitol Hill talking to the House Financial Services Committee about a variety of things, and both the Republicans and Democrats had some tough questions for Chairman Gensler. This started when House Financial Services Chairman Patrick McHenry, who has authored the stablecoin legislation, got Chairman Gensler to say that he didn't believe that Bitcoin was a security and therefore under the SEC's jurisdiction. Now, of course, this doesn't mean that he thinks Bitcoin is necessarily a commodity, which would then be under the Commodities Future Trade Commission's jurisdiction. He just thinks it's not necessarily a security. However, he did reiterate that he thinks that most crypto tokens are in fact under his jurisdiction and would fall under what the SEC can regulate. Now, I think one of the most interesting and illuminating parts of the hearing is when 35-year-old Democratic Congressman from New York, Richie Torres, asked Chairman Gensler if buying a Pokemon card would be considered a security because it could go up in value and therefore be under the SEC's jurisdiction. Chairman Gensler said no. However, when Congressman Torres asked Chairman Gensler if tokenizing the Pokemon card would make it a security, Chairman Gensler said that he would need more information. This gives a lot to the thinking of the current SEC chairman, where just the act of tokenizing something that's physical or could be sold for a profit might fall under their jurisdiction. Needless to say, Congress has a lot more questions for Chairman Gensler, and this is certainly not the last time he will be up at Capitol Hill in the coming weeks, so we will keep you updated right here at the Web3 Working Group.
Excellent. Cool.
Thanks, Eric.
So that's going to be something we're going to be doing a little bit more as we can, bring in kind of some specialists in certain areas to kind of give us little insert segments. So thank you, Eric.
And the shutdown will definitely be delaying the crypto legislation that we've all so hoped would be moving through Congress.
There's no shutdown. What are you talking about?
They only have 45 days.
Oh,
like the looming,
sure.
It's just like they just kicked the ball down the field 45 days like that.
They did, but something really interesting happened today that might make it a little less likely for it to be looming again in the future. A lot of people didn't like the leadership of
Kevin McCarthy, and now Patrick McHenry is the Speaker of the House.
Pro tempore.
Temporarily. But that's amazing for the crypto industry to have somebody who is so knowledgeable, so pro-crypto.
Anyone who's tried has failed.
Is an unstoppable force.
Yes. He is now the Speaker of the House, ladies and gentlemen. That's pretty cool.
That is very cool. Also very cool is that another crypto champion, Tom Emmer, his bill that's an anti-CBDC bill has passed the House Financial Services Committee and is headed to a vote before the House. This is an incredibly important bill in terms of just protecting our freedoms, because privacy is normal. And for every transaction to be public, for a network like this to be fully under the control of the government, it leads to the kind of dystopian future everyone is scared about when it comes to crypto and AI, because people can just be shut off for wrongthink or what have you. It's the kind of China social credit score scenario that would be potentially the infrastructure would be in place for something like that to happen here in the U.S. It's just absolutely un-American. And so seeing this bill move forward after 3 years of work is just a moment that we need to acknowledge and applaud, and we hope that it will pass.
Yeah, it's interesting because I remember early on some of the biggest pushback about blockchain is money has to be have a stamp of approval from a government, otherwise it's worthless. Well, that's obviously been disproven that Bitcoin is not worthless. Obviously, say whatever you might about it, but it's clearly not worthless. So it having value was not derived from having to be issued from the government. And CBDCs are basically just taking everything but the value part and taking everything that government can do with money except for the value part and attaching the rest of it. The whole point of governments backing money is just supposed to give the faith that money will be redeemed. It's not supposed to be a mechanism for spying, a mechanism for control, a mechanism for shutting down your ability to use it. That's dystopian, like you said, un-American. It's very, like, I remember seeing some really awful videos out of China of people, because China moved very quickly along with the WePay and I was there a couple of years ago, and there's this, you can't use cash to buy anything. Everything's on WePay, and a lot of people think it's a huge convenience, and it is. You know, I'll be honest, that every single
their payment processing systems are a decade more ahead of ours.
Easily. But it also means it was something like a whole building worth of people got home late and they weren't able to get their COVID test or something or other, and so their building locked them out, and literally everyone was sleeping outside their building. A whole apartment building worth of people had to sleep outside because the building wouldn't let them in. And it's like, and in that case, you don't have anyone to turn to, because you know that this was actually kind of decided by your actual central government, and that, you know, whatever. We don't want that. We don't want that. We don't want to live under an empire, obviously. So whatever you have to say about, you know, anti-money laundering and everything like that, there are many other mechanisms to prevent anti-money laundering, some of which are honestly breaking the Fourth Amendment as it is, but, you know, leave that aside. We don't need it to be baked into the money itself. And so making the argument that CBDCs are necessary because governments are the only things that can issue money for it to be valuable, to have value, I think is disproven by the fact that Bitcoin exists and there's so much pushback against CBDCs. I hope this works.
I do too. Absolutely.
Yeah.
We are here for you. If there's anything we can do to help provide education, please reach out to us. We exist to help keep crypto legal in the US and for Web3 to be able to grow here. So yeah. On that happy note.
Well, that's the end of our show for the week. So we are going to be sticking with these Wednesdays. I think we're going to actually change the name. It's not going to be the weekly wrap up. It's going to be the Wednesday Web3 Wednesdays. Web3 Wednesdays.
I don't know.
Works for me.
Let us know what you think.
Yeah.
Have a great rest of your week. We'll see you next Wednesday. Till then.
Bye, everyone.